All right, you guys, today we are taking on the Pythagorean spiral. So a Pythagorean spiral is a series of right triangles that are arranged in a spiral configuration such that the hypotenuse of one right triangle is the leg of the next right triangle. There are 16 right triangles that make up one configuration of the spiral. So just to give you a sense of what I'm talking about, this is what it's going to actually look like in the end once our construction is complete. We're going to see 16 total right triangles as we wrap around. And like I said earlier, we're going to see that the hypotenuse of one right triangle, so let's look at this initial right triangle right here. We see a leg of 1, a leg of root 1, which is really 1, and a hypotenuse of root 2. So in our next stage right here in this right triangle, that root 2, it was the hypotenuse of that first right triangle. It becomes a leg in this second right triangle. So again, what we're going to see is we're going to see a series of right triangles like so. We're keeping one leg constant at 1 unit, and we're going to see that the hypotenuses, the radicand value, the number that's underneath the radical, is going to increase by 1 from stage to stage. All right, when you are finished with the construction, you will decorate your spiral in a unique and creative way. Please be sure to mark all legs and hypotenuses, so record their measurements, as well as the right angles. You may also continue and add more iterations, more stages on a larger sheet of paper. So if you continued and you wrapped around beyond those 16 right triangles, you might get a visual that looks something like so if you're super ambitious and you take it this far, right? You could easily just go a little bit further without going as far as this example. That would be fine too. All right, materials that we're going to need. We need one piece of white paper, so a standard 8.5 by 11 inch white sheet of paper. We need a ruler, our compass, a pencil, and our colored pencils to decorate and beautify in the end. A starting position. This is really important because we want to make sure that everything fits on the paper. So place the paper in landscape position and measure 15 centimeters to the right and 10 centimeters down from the top left corner. Okay, so landscape position. We're going to look at it wide, just like this. We want to go from that top left-hand corner 15 centimeters to the right and 10 down, and right there, that dot will be our starting position. Again, that's super important because we don't want to go off of the paper. Okay, when I go over the mechanics of it next, it's important to review the Pythagorean theorem. So the Pythagorean theorem pertains to right triangles. We know that these perpendicular sides here, those are our legs, and the C is always opposite the right angle. It's our largest side. We call it the hypotenuse. So Pythagorean theorem, we know that a squared plus b squared equals c squared. Okay, I'm going to flip it around and write the c squared on the left-hand side. So c squared equals a squared plus b squared. Right, it's really the same equation. I've just switched the left and right sides. If I want to solve for my hypotenuse, the c value, right, I'm assuming that a, b, and c are positive integers. They have to be in order to make a triangle. Then I can now solve for c by taking the square root of each side. So I can take the square root here, the square root here, right? Taking the square root of a square unlocks it and leaves us with just c. So c, the hypotenuse, is equal to the square root of a squared plus b squared. So the square root of the sum of the squares of the two legs. C equals square root of a squared plus b squared. So here again, I just want to point out the pattern that emerges and why it emerges this way. So here I'm giving you one triangle to start right here. I'm going to mark the other leg as 1. So I'm really giving you what's called an isosceles right triangle. I have 2 legs that are the same, and my triangle is right. I have that 190-degree angle. So I know that C, my hypotenuse, is equal to the square root of 1 squared plus 1 squared. So square root of 1 plus 1 leaves me with the square root of 2. So my hypotenuse here would be the square root of 2. My hypotenuse of this triangle is going to become the leg right here of my next triangle. So I'm going to put root 2 right here. So now I want to solve for the hypotenuse. So C equals the square root of 1 squared plus the square root of 2 as a quantity squared, just like that. 1 squared is 1, that's easy enough. When I square a square root, it unlocks the square, right? It really gives me a pair of 2's underneath the radical. It's the pair I want, so it becomes just 2. So when I add those, I get 3. So square root of 3 for my next hypotenuse. Okay, my hypotenuse here becomes the leg of my next right triangle. So my hypotenuse now, C, is equal to the square root of 1 squared plus the square root of 3 as a quantity squared, just like that. Okay, 1 squared is 1. The square of root 3, right? Root 3 squared is just 3. So I get the square root of 4. Now I know that I can simplify that. I'm just trying to show you what everything looks like in radical form. So I'm going to leave that as the square root of 4, even though I know it can simplify to just 2. So now I think we see the pattern of what is happening, right? We're seeing that as we progress, we see that our hypotenuses, the number underneath the radical, is increasing by 1 each time, because we're keeping a leg constant at 1, and we're using the hypotenuse of the previous triangle to be the leg of the new one. So I'd have a root 4 right here. I see my pattern, and I'd have a root 5 right here for my next hypotenuse. Root 5 would be the next hypotenuse right there. So again, I just wanted to take you through some of the mechanics of the pattern that's emerging in our spiral. So now take out your sheet of paper. Make sure you're looking at it in terms of the landscape, like so. Let me zoom out so you can see what I'm talking about. Let me just get into view. Zooming out a little bit. Okay, so here from that upper left-hand corner, so here's my starting position. I want to go 15 centimeters to the right. So right here looks good. Let me mark a little notch. So that's 15 centimeters to the right. And then I'm going 10 centimeters down. So right here is that sweet spot. Right there is going to be my starting point. Okay, let me slide that up. Let me get a little bit more zoomed in now that we have that starting point. So again, we needed to be 15 centimeters to the right, 10 down from that upper left-hand corner. So now from that starting point, I want to draw a segment that is 1 inch to the right, like so. I'm going to put a little dot on it to cap it at 1 inch, and then I'm going to overshoot it ever so slightly, like so. So now what I need to do is I need to create the perpendicular pathway that slices through this point. So I need to create a right angle. So I need to make that perpendicular pathway. So to do that, I'm going to keep my compass fairly narrow. I'm keeping it at a fairly small setting. So here I need it to be a little bit less than an inch. So I have mine at about 2/3 of an inch. That feels good. And then I need to make this initial arc. Okay, so my needle was on that point, and my initial arc needs to slice through both sides of the segment that I drew. So my needle was here, I drew an arc, it sliced through on both sides. What I really have to focus on now is this segment, and I'm trying to create that perpendicular bisector that slices through this point, okay? And I'm trying to bisect this segment. So I need to find where my other arcs would fall in this interior space when I open my compass a little bit wider. So I can't keep the current setting, it has to be just a little bit wider. So this setting feels good, it's just a little bit wider. I'm going to put my needle here. I'm going to make an arc in this interior space like so. I'm going to put my needle over here and I'm going to replicate that process right here, just like so. So now I take my straight edge, I take my ruler, and I want to go 1 inch from this point right here through this point of intersection, just like so. Put a little dot to bookend it. Okay, and then connect back to our original starting point. That's going to be the hypotenuse of our first right triangle. I'm going to overshoot ever so slightly. Every time I draw on a hypotenuse, I'm going to overshoot ever so slightly. I'm going to get in the habit of marking the right angle right there. This is 1 inch. This is 1 inch. The hypotenuse is the square root of 2. All right, now I do the process again. So I'm going to put my compass right here, my needle right here. I'm going to start with that initial arc that slices through on both sides. Just like so. Okay, and what I'm really doing is I'm looking at these two endpoints. I'm looking at that as a segment, and I'm really constructing its perpendicular bisector. So my compass has to be open a little bit wider than its current setting. It doesn't have to be dramatic, just a smidge is fine. So if my needle is here, I can see, okay, it's a little bit wider. So needle right there, I'm going to make an arc in the interior like so. Go over to this point of intersection and do the same thing, just like that. Okay, my ruler now connects from this point through that point of intersection. Let me make sure I'm on inches. So here we go. So 1 inch along that pathway. Stop right here, draw a dot. Okay, draw in my hypotenuse, but overshoot it ever so slightly, like that. So again, I have a right angle here. This leg is staying constant at 1, and my new hypotenuse is the square root of 3. Okay, let me do a couple more stages of it so you guys get the hang of it. Then I'll let you do it independently. So now my compass setting right now is great. Needle goes right here. I draw that initial arc that slices through on both sides. I'm focusing on this as a segment. I want to create the perpendicular bisector of that segment. My compass has to be open just a little bit wider. Needle goes right here. Make an arc in the interior like so. Move it to here. Make an arc in the interior like so. Take your ruler, line it up. So I want to make sure that I'm at 1 inch, and I want it to pass through this point, through that point of intersection. There we go, 1 inch. Okay, I'm going to bookend it, put that little dot there, and then I'm going to draw in the hypotenuse, but overshoot it ever so slightly, just like so. I'm going to add in the right angle right there. mark this as 1 unit. And as I progress through this, my hypotenuse, the radicand value, increases by 1. So I have the square root of 4 right here. I know that that would simplify to 2, but I'm going to express everything as a radical here. I'm going to do one more stage of this. All right, so again, my compass setting, whatever it's at, should be good. Put my needle right here, make the arc that slices through on both sides. Okay, now I am interested in this segment. I'm really constructing the perpendicular bisector of it. I need my compass open just a smidge wider. I'm going to go to this endpoint right here, make an arc in the interior like so. Put my needle right here, look at where it crosses. Okay, line up your ruler. So here we want to be 1 inch. We want to slice through the point provided in that point of intersection right there. Bookend it, little dot, just like so. Draw in the hypotenuse of the right triangle, but overshoot it ever so slightly like so. Draw in the right angle. Mark this as 1 inch. And your next hypotenuse would be the square root of 5, just like so. Okay, I'm going to stop there and let you guys work independently on it. I want to remind you of what the final draft will look like before you start to beautify it, decorate it. It's going to end up looking like so. You should end up with 16 right triangles. You should have all of the labels, so all of these legs should be 1 inch. We should see that all of our hypotenuses have radicands that are increasing by 1 unit each time. So square root of 1 to square root of 2, square root of 3, and so forth. Okay, all of those right angles should be marked also. And you should, if you've done all of your constructions properly, you should end up with a little gap right in here. If you choose to take it further on your regular sheet of paper, that's fine. You could have more stages showing up, not a big deal. I like seeing that. Or you could ask for a larger sheet of paper and you could go even more stages and get something more elaborate that looks like this. If you just use your regular sheet of paper, you can only go a few extras. I think you get about to here before you get cut off by the paper. So if you want to try this, go further, just ask for a larger sheet of paper to practice with. All right, that's all I got. Have a lovely rest of your day.